What if, beyond the veils of time and sand, there existed a kingdom so radiant with wisdom that even the echo of its queen's name stirred the deepest longings of our own hearts? What if, across the dry and shifting dunes of history, a journey unfolded not by blade or conquest, but by the quiet, unstoppable force of curiosity? In the world's earliest days, when the stars still seemed young and the heart of humanity beat with a quiet question, a queen looked north into the mystery and dared to seek out the truth hiding beyond her throne. Of stories of heaven's mysteries, of ancient spiritual struggles, or the first breath that gave rise to mankind, have ever left you in wonder? Pause now, like this video, subscribe to Bible Stories, and in the comments, WRITE 777, if your spirit has ever been stirred with the profound unknown. Such questions mark you as one of the chosen, those who seek answers beyond the surface, those unafraid to journey for hidden wisdom. Let us slow the pace, draw in a calming breath, and step together into the golden dawn of Sheba world, not just of wealth, but of reverence for understanding. Imagine a realm where the air is saturated with the sweetness of frankincense and myrrh, and every gust of wind whispers not only the sound of commerce, but also the secrets of ages. The kingdom of Sheba stands as a mystic jewel on the ancient world's crown, its rivers running not just with water, but with knowledge as valued as gold dust. Here, the wise and the bold walk in step, and truth is the currency more precious than any gemstone. In the heart of this sun-soaked land reigns a woman whose legend endures for reasons far greater than dominion. The Queen of Sheba, her name, whether Makeda or Bilqis, shrouded in the mists of oral tradition, is not remembered for conquest or the clamor of armies. Instead, she is a beacon of inquiry, a sovereign made remarkable not just by circumstance, but by her endless pursuit of meaning. From her earliest days, the queen is raised amid the splendor and subtlety of a sophisticated court. She does not lounge idly in the shade of acacia trees. Instead, she learns commerce with the sharpest traders, diplomacy with wily rulers, and the delicate mathematics of exchange. The lore of her ancestors courses through her veins, and her mind becomes a storehouse for philosophy, for stories, for the coded wisdom encoded in song and riddle. She is taught, above all, that a true sovereign does not only guard riches, but protects the legacy of their people's understanding and peace. Why would she not, therefore, seek the expansion of the soul instead of the mere expansion of borders? Many would seek her hand, bearing treaties and promises, but even among royal circles, she is not easy to sway. Her heart yearns not for mere alliance, but for intellectual partnership, a mind that can challenge her, spark her, draw her into ever deeper mysteries. And so, as the queen grows, she listens carefully to the shifting winds. On one of them calls, from far beyond her borders rides the persistent rumor of a different kingdom. The tales speak not just of riches, but of a king whose wisdom is said to be unparalleled. Israel, land of the Hebrews, flourishes under Solomon, a monarch said to commune with the divine, whose judgments resound through his nation like psalms. Over still water. To the Queen of Sheba, these tales are more than idle gossip at court. They are a summons, a call to adventure, not for conquest, but for illumination. If this Solomon truly is a sage among kings, she must see for herself. For in her heart, she knows that only in the collision of minds can true wisdom arise, and only within the crucible of noble inquiry does light burn clear. And thus, a decision is born not from necessity or political calculation, but from the queen's unquenchable yearning for knowledge. Dust begins to rise, and caravans form. She gathers not only gifts of gold, spices, and gems, but also brings with her the weightier cargo of profound questions. Riddles crafted to test the metal of any mind, questions honed on the stone of her own traditions. As her caravan snakes out of Sheba and across parched wilderness toward Jerusalem, her journey is more than geographic. It is pilgrimage and odyssey for the mind and the spirit. The reader, the listener, is invited to slow their own journey now. Picture the queen's retinue, a procession glimmering across the landscape, bearing treasures, but also an eager hush. Imagine their hopes, their anticipation, and the queen's own inward trembling at what may be revealed. Sheba's destiny, perhaps human destiny itself, rests on whether the world's wisdom is to be hoarded or shared. At the edge of Israel, a land so unlike her own unfolds before her. Different stars overhead, different smoldering incense, a devotion not to many spirits, but to one singular, mighty God Yahweh. Israel's prayers rise with the dawn, not two distant and tangled gods, but to a singular presence, believed by Solomon and his people to be the very creator. Does the difference daunt her? No. Her curiosity is too rooted, too profoundly established. She is not one to sneer or shrink before difference, but to let her questions grow. As she and her entourage pass through Jerusalem's gates, she is received, not as an invader, but with the reverence due a sovereign seeker. She comes cloaked in both splendor and humility, not to impose her will, but to probe something deeper, something that has drawn her over endless leagues. It is not the shimmer of her jewels or the abundance of her gifts that marks her out, it is the intelligence in her eyes. Those who see her for the first time are struck not by beauty alone, but by an unmistakable searching gaze, one that promises she does not seek easy answers nor is satisfied by hollow praise. And once she meets Solomon, the encounter becomes the nexus around which history will turn. It is not a diplomatic meeting in the ordinary sense. It is the summit of two of the ancient world's greatest minds. Their conversation will be less a matter of political negotiation and more a profound exchange, one that will reverberate outward, echoing across centuries into the texts, the prayers, and the hearts of all who yearn for understanding. Let us now pause in this moment of hushed anticipation, for soon the Queen of Sheba will speak, and the king will answer. The riddles will be uttered, and the wisdom of Solomon will face the searching fire of a kindred spirit. You, listener, are drawn into this sacred circle. If your heart has ever pulsed with questions too deep for easy consolation, if you have ever wondered what mysteries pulse at the world's center, this is your story to remember. Before we continue, to like, subscribe to Bible Stories, and comment 777 if the mysteries of heaven, the fierce struggles in hidden realms, or those first secret days of the world have ever beckoned your soul. Your voice, your curiosity, is the torch that lights this path. Together, we will follow the Queen of Sheba beyond the borders of comfort and into the heart of wisdom, where every answer is both a blessing and a call to deeper search. Are you ready? Let us continue, for the journey has only just begun. Settle in and allow yourself to drift into the fragrant corridors and bustling courtyards of Jerusalem. The Queen of Sheba's grand arrival was more than a mere protocol. It was as if two ancient rivers of wisdom were about to meet, their currents mingling to create something utterly new. Visualize now the long line of camels, their backs burdened not only by treasures, but by the weight of questions that had traveled far and wide. These were not just gifts for show. Countless spices, gleaming bars of gold, and rare stones shimmered in the desert sun, symbolizing honor, respect, and anticipation. Yet, greatest weight they carried was curiosity itself, the very currency that can change nations and hearts. Inside the city, the anticipation could almost be felt on the wind. Israel had grown used to visitors seeking trade or alliances, but this was a visitation unlike any before. Not a single sword was raised. Instead, a meeting of minds was about to occur, one that would reverberate forever through the halls of history and the prayers of those who believe. The Queen's first impressions were shaped not by the city's grand monuments, but by something deeper, the orderliness of Solomon's realm. She gazed upon bustling markets, the proud faces of a prosperous people, and the sacred rhythms that punctuated daily life. Every action seemed to echo an underlying order, a subtle harmony. It was, perhaps, the visible evidence of the invisible, the wisdom for which King Solomon was famed. Solomon himself, wise and penetrating, was no ordinary monarch. He stood at the heart of this order, a leader whose renown had crossed seas and deserts. The tales that reached Sheba had not been exaggerated. Within him resided a rare blend of discernment, intellect, and an unwavering faith in Yahweh, the God of Israel. He ruled not with the iron hand of fear, but with the gentle, persistent force of justice and understanding. Like a psalm that laps gently yet insistently at the shores of the heart, Solomon's presence transformed every detail of his land. When at last their paths converged, it was as if history took a breath and the world awaited what would follow. The queen did not rush, a ruler in her own right. She carried herself with elegance, radiating both humility and an inner power. Her garments caught the light. Her eyes, sharper than any jewel, missed nothing. She was greeted with all the dignity due to greatness. Yet what set this occasion apart was not the formal protocol, but the deep mutual recognition between seeker and sage. Imagine the hall, hushed and radiant, attendants on either side, incense curling upward as if to bridge heaven and earth. The queen seated across from King Solomon, What passed between them at first was not the language of politics, but the language of wisdom. It was the language of those who, regardless of distance, recognize a spiritual kinship, a shared longing for the more behind the world's surface. She began not with flattery or frivolity, but with riddles. In the ancient world, a riddle was never a joke or a game alone. It was a spiritual test, a probe into the depths, not merely of intellect, but of soul. She asked what others would not dare, voicing puzzles that had troubled the wise of her own court. What is it that walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? What is swifter than wind, and more bitter than death? Her questions were not simply for sport, but designed to peel back the constellations of understanding, until something essential and true was revealed. Solomon listened, truly listened. Each riddle, each probing inquiry, was received not with exasperation, but with a patient openness that marked true wisdom. He responded not only with answers, but with questions of his own. Their exchange was a dance, each step choreographed by a mutual respect and a shared hunger for what lay beneath mere appearance. Both were seekers, one whose kingdom lay in the south, another whose legacy would define a people. That as she tested him, so too did she watch. The queen requested to see his administration, the workings of his palace, the justice dispensed at his courts, and the rituals of worship in the grand temple built to Yahweh. She watched the fairness doled out to rich and poor alike. She observed the kindness with which servants were treated, the attention to beauty and detail, even in the clothing of temple guardians. Every observation was an answer to her unspoken question: what is the source of this kingdom's prosperity and harmony? Is here that the story deepens, moving away from the surface of regal interaction into the fertile soil of spiritual revelation. The queen saw rituals unlike those of Sheba, ceremonies and prayers not to a pantheon of competing gods, but to one unseeable, universal, present God. She saw offerings raised not as bribes for fortune, but as invitations to divine justice and mercy. In the deep chanting of the Levites, she sensed a longing much like her own, a longing for truth at the very heart of being. The Psalms echo through these chambers, calling all nations, all peoples, to witness the wonders of Yahweh. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, chants Psalm 111. And perhaps in that moment, the queen glimpsed that this fear was not terror, but reverence, awe, trembling before the goodness and power that orders all creation. And the more she saw, the more her questions gave way to wonder. What had begun as a test, an exercise to gauge the truth of Solomon's wisdom, became for her an unfolding discovery. As if the gates of understanding themselves were opening wider with every hour. She noticed not merely organization, but joy among the people, gratitude, and a living spirit that could not be accounted for by ritual alone. Small feet for a rulership allowed herself to be moved. She opened her heart to the possibility that greatness might flow not solely from human ingenuity, but from harmony with the divine. This required humility, that rarest of royal qualities, the willingness to learn from another's truth, and to let it shape your own. The Queen of Sheba, who had conquered much, approached the throne of wisdom with open hands. As the days passed, her journey became less about answers and more about the transformation that comes from truly encountering wisdom. Whether observing the wealth of Solomon's court, the efficiency of his administrators, or the transcendent peace found in the prayers and sacrifices at the temple, she traced everything back to its root, a faith in the God who created all, gave life, and endowed the wise with insight. All spiritual journeys eventually draw the seeker into contemplation. Ancient proverbs and the words of the wise throughout all ages remind us that to seek understanding is to approach the divine, and that in such seeking, the heart itself is changed. The Queen of Sheba, far from her home, underwent not a loss, but a deepening. She did not shed her own traditions, but allowed herself to be enriched. To see that wisdom could be found wherever truth was embraced, humility practiced, and justice done. To be present in this moment is to witness the quiet rhythms of grace. For as the Queen and Solomon conversed, as questions met answers and answers begot yet deeper questions, what arose between them was more than knowledge. It was a bond one forged by respect, curiosity, and a willingness to see past boundaries. It is in this space, between question and response, that wisdom truly shows its face. Pause with me, listener, in the stillness of this realization. Have you ever gone seeking an answer, only to find that the journey transformed you? Have you entered into dialogue with the hope of proving, only to be proven wrong and to rejoice, because the discovery brought you closer to the heart of truth? If you have, then the Queen's pilgrimage is yours as well. Now, gently remember to like this story, subscribe to our Bible Stories channel if you haven't already, and share your thoughts or 777 in the comments if the heart of this journey resonates with your own. Let your voice join those who seek, who ponder, who rejoice in learning. There in the heart of Jerusalem, under the watchful gaze of heaven, two sovereigns sat as fellow pilgrims upon the road of wisdom, understanding that the true riches are the bonds formed through sincere pursuit of what is good, beautiful, and true. Their meeting stands not only as a moment of history, but as a living invitation, an invitation that endures, calling every generation to step out, to seek, to listen, and to be changed in the light of wisdom that is, in the end, divine. Go slowly, breathe deeply, and let the story continue its gentle, persistent unfolding one step further along the journey of the Spirit. Let us allow the dust of that golden encounter between Queen and King to gently settle, and as it does, we find ourselves at a new threshold, the moment after certainty, when the greatest questions have been aired and the answers have settled into the heart. This is not the end of the journey, but the sacred stillness that follows revelation, the exhale, after the breathless anticipation of discovery. What happens to the soul when it has found not only what it sought, but more than it ever imagined possible? In the palaces of Jerusalem, the Queen of Sheba was not merely a guest honored by custom, but a true witness to another kind of greatness, wisdom, not built on pride or victory, but on justice, order, and humble communion with God. For days, perhaps even weeks, she dwelt in the luminous courts of Solomon. Each morning, the city awoke to the sounds of commerce and prayer, sunlight streaming across stone and cedar, and Sheba's queen found herself quietly transformed. The conversations did not end with the exchange of riddles. On the contrary, they deepened, stretching into the cool of the evenings, winding through the shade of lush gardens and the awe-inspiring grandeur of the temple. There is a time for every purpose under heaven, as the ancient writer of Ecclesiastes would later pen, perhaps inspired by Solomon himself. The Queen of Sheba sensed this rhythm, that there is a time to speak and a time to listen, a time for challenge and a time for surrender to wonder. Her soul, so long trained to probe and to question, began now to rest in contemplation. She became not just a seeker, but a receiver, open to a divine wisdom that far exceeded human cunning. It may be that in Solomon's words and in the peace of Jerusalem, she discovered the very heart of what she had searched for all her life, a sacred order, a wisdom not earned but bestowed as a gift from above. What was it that so moved her? It was not the gold, nor the spices, nor the many details of architecture and ritual, as overwhelming as those things were. It was the harmony she witnessed, a society ordered not simply by discipline, but by an inner coherence radiating outward from its king. The Book of Psalms echoes, "Happy are those who walk in the ways of the Lord, who meditate on his law day and night." And here, in this foreign land, Sheba's queen saw a happiness not dependent upon circumstance, but upon alignment with something higher, joyful discipline flowing from a living faith. Imagine her wandering the halls one twilight, incense still perfuming the air, the sacred chants tracing lines of prayer into the night sky. She ponders the difference between her people's worship and this new testimony, between her world's many gods and the singular, overwhelming presence of YHWH. There, perhaps, she realizes that wisdom is not a fortress to be scaled by intellect alone, but a well from which the humble may drink. Her heart, forever attuned to mystery, now drinks deeply. With every passing day, her questions subtly change. No longer does she press only for clever answers to famous riddles, but for a different kind of knowledge, the hidden wisdom of what it means to live well, to rule justly, to honor what cannot be seen except by eyes of faith. She notices how the prosperity of Israel is shared through justice among the people, how the king's counselors are chosen for character rather than flattery, and how every ritual in the temple points not to the ego of a king, but to the glory of God. There comes a turning, slow as sunrise, and as gentle the movement from outward curiosity to inner revelation. The Queen of Sheba, so used to commanding answers, now submits herself to wonder. She tastes the flavor of humility, which does not diminish but ennobles. The words of ancient proverbs breathe, With humility comes wisdom. Her enlightenment is not about dominance or victory, but awe, respect, and participation in the grand order of creation. Think of her in the long nights, quietly reflecting in her chambers. She remembers the words spoken, the acts witnessed, and feels the flames of old certainties yield to a greater warmth, a light of understanding joined with reverence. Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and set you on the throne of Israel, she will soon say. But long before such words are uttered, the blessing begins quietly in her own soul. And so, as the weeks draw on, something in the Queen of Sheba is irrevocably changed. Perhaps she realizes for the first time that truth cannot be owned or possessed, not even by a queen. It is a gift, radiant, and its receipt requires both hunger and humility. What her teachers in Sheba taught her was not wrong, but is everywhere sought, but is most potent when surrendered to fully. In her encounter with Solomon, she witnesses this rare phenomenon, profound strength, joined to humility before God. All great journeys hinge on these moments of turning. When the seeker finds herself sought by what she was searching for, it is as if wisdom itself, once a distant shining star, has turned and fixed its gaze upon her, inviting her ever deeper. This is echoed in the psalmist's words, deep calls unto deep. Something in Solomon, in his people's prayers, in the ordered beauty of their lives, calls to the innermost part of her spirit. When we too pursue understanding, when we ask questions, debate, doubt, and search, we may at first believe ourselves to be in control. Yet the greatest truths find us postureless, surrendered, changed, and if only for a breath, caught up in awe. Let us pause and breathe in this spiritual stillness. Have you not known moments when you set out to master some knowledge, only to be mastered by it? When humility replaced certainty, and in that humility, you found the very wisdom you had sought. If so, your journey is kindred with Sheba's queen. Comment 777 below if you have ever felt yourself changed by the very truth you once sought to interrogate. Like and subscribe, letting your spirit bear witness with all who hunger and thirst after what is true, beautiful, and eternal. Now, as the days dwindle and the time approaches for the Queen of Sheba's return journey, the entire atmosphere is altered. The initial tension of the unknown has yielded to a profound communion. The gifts she brought, gold, incense, precious stones, now seem by comparison almost symbolic. Offerings placed at the altar of a much deeper exchange. There is now between Solomon and the Queen a tenderness born not of romance or ambition, but of the deepest respect. This is the kind of friendship that can only be forged in the honest sharing of questions and the trust that arises from true dialogue. Both have been changed, Solomon in recognizing a spirit equal to his own, and Sheba's queen in finding wisdom that refreshes as rain upon a thirsty land. What passes between them in these final days? Surely parting words, yes, but also a silent vow. The wisdom she has witnessed cannot remain only in Jerusalem. It must be carried homeward, shared with her people, and woven into the very fabric of her reign. The transformation she experiences is not selfish, but communal. For who receives wisdom must also bear its light where darkness still lingers. This, then, is the mysterious economy of the Spirit. Gifts are given, but far greater things are received. Outwardly, the queen offers Solomon her talents of gold, stores of spices, rare and precious stones. In return, Solomon gives all that she desires and much more. Beyond measure, kingly generosity, echoing the boundless nature of grace. The scriptures note, there came no more such abundance of spices as these, which the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Yet what has truly been exchanged cannot be weighed on scales. The queen does not depart in triumph, nor in regret, but in quiet fulfillment. A dimension of mystery remains. What words did they speak privately? What prayers might she have whispered as she looked from the Temple Mount toward her homeland? Some say she left carrying the seeds of new understanding, others, the very lineage of nations. Legends will blossom, but the living truth outlasts the telling. Wisdom mutually sought, mutually honored, and allowed to change all who encounter it. The journey home is now before her, yet in spirit she is already changed, and, with her, the world. The story does not end in Jerusalem, but continues reaching even to us. If we are willing to listen, so let your own heart pause in gratitude. Take stock of your own questions, your longings, and the truths you have found. Linger in this light, for the next stage of the journey beckons a journey, not back, but ever onward. carrying wisdom into a waiting world. And so, with humility and anticipation, let us travel with the Queen as she turns her face toward home, yet never truly leaves behind what she has found. The journey, gentle listener and reader, is never truly finished. There is always more to seek, more to learn, and a deeper wisdom that awaits the humble traveler. Are you ready for what comes next? Let us walk on, together, slowly, as the greatest stories always invite. There are moments, both in story and in life, when the journey home is no longer merely a return, but the quiet rise of a new dawn, one lit from within by all that has been discovered, questioned, and finally understood. As the Queen of Sheba prepared to leave Jerusalem behind, with its honeyed stones reflecting the sun and the fragrance of incense lingering in every memory, she was not the same woman who had once traveled north in search of truth. She was, in every sense, transformed, her mind deepened by wisdom, her heart pierced by humility, and her spirit awakened to a vision beyond the horizons of her kingdom. The lingering hush that follows a great conversation is a sacred one. For the Queen, this hush became an inner silence, a pause, heavy with thought, carrying the weight of insights too profound to be measured. She looked one last time at Solomon, studying the way his presence anchored the life of his people, not by decree alone, but by a steadiness that came from his trust in God. Even his wisdom seemed humble, as if every insight he offered was less a possession and more a gift received. When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. She might recall from her own readings of ancient proverbs, seeing how the king's greatness rested upon his willingness to listen and to serve. As her caravan assembled along the outer courts, laden now with gifts returned and blessings multiplied, the Queen lingered in Jerusalem's early morning light. It was a sacred threshold, crossing over from student back to sovereign. But with a new burden upon her shoulders, the burden of wisdom, she was filled not only with gratitude, but with a sober realization that what she had gleaned was not just for herself, but for the people who awaited her return, for the children who would inherit her legacy, and for the spaces and silences in her kingdom where truth was still unknown. Philosophers in every age have understood that wisdom, once glimpsed, insists on being shared. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, echoes a teaching of later days, but sets it on a stand to illumine all who are in the house. So it would be with the Queen of Sheba. The gold and spices she had exchanged were mere symbols. The real treasure was the living flame of insight she now bore. And as she journeyed southward, across the wilderness once more, each passing mile became not a retreat, but a sacred unfolding of what she had received. The landscape itself seemed changed not because it was different, but because she now saw it with new eyes. Let us pause in this journey and sit beside the Queen as she contemplates all that is past. How easy it would have been to clutch at these experiences, hoarding her discoveries just as one might guard a precious jewel. But the spirit of her journey, indeed, the spirit of wisdom itself, calls her and all of us to something greater. Wisdom is the great dissolver of boundaries. It does not cling, but opens. It does not hide, but seeks to bear fruit, like a seed scattered upon receptive ground. The Queen did not travel only for her own sake. She would become, in time, a vessel pouring out what she had learned for the benefit of her people. It is in these moments of reckoning that the deepest questions emerge. What will she do with what she has learned? Will she have the courage to reshape the customs and structures of her realm, to allow humility and justice to flow like new watercourses under her rule? The Bible often tells of those whose encounters with the divine demand a response. Abraham, leaving Ur, Moses returning from Sinai, Mary pondering mysteries in her heart. For the Queen of Sheba, this is her turning, her Sinai, her annunciation. The time for questions is not ended, but transformed. The riddle now is not what is true, but how shall I live in light of what I have learned? Imagine her reflecting on Solomon's God not as a stranger's deity, but as the living wellspring of all wisdom, to whom every insight is a return. She recalls the devotion she witnessed, the rituals that centered not on pride or power, but awe and thankfulness, the people gathering, the psalms rising. Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Such words now pulse in her like a living spring. Far from her own temples, she carries these prayers within, aware that wisdom's source is not confined by borders or tongues. With each passing day on the return, her caravan weaves a moving tapestry across the wilderness, the dust rising behind as if erasing their earlier footprints. The journey is not one of mere distance, but but deepening an inner movement from certainty to humility, from questioning to communion. At every camp, as the firelight flickers and voices grow hushed, the Queen gathers her counselors and trusted attendants. She recounts not just Solomon's answers, but the deeper truths his life revealed, that genuine greatness is marked by service, and that the peace she found in Jerusalem was rooted in something far greater than fortune. The Queen, there's no naive idealist. She knows that ancient customs do not yield overnight, that people's hearts can be hard soil for new seeds. But like the sower in the parable, she is compelled to scatter what has been entrusted to her, to nurture with patient discipline what she hopes will one day blossom. Her court, once proud of their traditions and wary of foreign ideas, are drawn into her gentle confidence. She invites them to reason not only from habit, but from hope, and demonstrates through justice what she has seen at home in Sheba. Her arrival signals not just the return of a monarch, but the birth of a new era. Her reign becomes, in the stories later told, a time marked by both prosperity and peace, but, more importantly, by a striking new spirit in its laws and culture. The Queen's fascination with riddles now matures into a love of dialogue, her hunger for answers becoming a commitment to listening, mediating, and emboldening others to seek truth themselves. In the days that follow, the wisdom of Israel, a wisdom she once regarded with suspicions, secretly infuses her own decrees. Disputes are resolved not with harsh discipline, but with carefully discerned justice. The well-being of her people is weighed not in coins or tribute alone, but by the harmony and hope they experience in daily life. What is the measure of a wise ruler? Is it in the abundance of possessions, the reach of their power, or the legacy left in the hearts of those they lead? The Queen of Sheba's story invites us to consider a deeper metric, whether what one receives transforms not just the self, but the world around. Her humility is now the central jewel of her crown. Where once she might have demanded allegiance, she wins loyalty through compassion and trust. Where before wisdom was viewed as a means to rule, it now becomes her way to serve. Here the story touches eternity for all who read or hear it. Her journey stands as a living parable, the very shape of spiritual transformation. The Queen's movement from seeker to wise sovereign mirrors what is possible for every life open to truth, to receive, to be changed, and to make change possible for others. This is why, across traditions, her legend endures. In Christian teaching, Jesus references the Queen's quest as the ideal of spiritual openness, contrasting her integrity with those who, despite being surrounded by miracles, refuse to believe. In Ethiopian heritage, she is revered as the progenitor of a royal house that will carry the wisdom of Jerusalem into a new age. In every telling, her search becomes our own search, the restless movement toward a light that, once glimpsed, can never be entirely forgotten. As we pause, let us listen to the call embedded in this journey. Are you, too, willing to be changed by the truths you find, even when they unsettle you? Will you, like the Queen, risk the discomfort of new understanding, returning home not just with treasures, but with a spirit renewed, bearing light? If this story stirs something in your soul, let your own voice join the circle. Subscribe and share below how your life has been changed by wisdom bravely sought and graciously received. Comment 777 if your heart yearns for the kind of transformation that elevates both you and those you love. The Queen of Sheba's journey is never merely her own. It is the story of humanity's longing for the divine, for order, for meaning, and at its heart is an invitation. Wisdom is not the end, but the beginning, the vital spark that calls us to shape a world modeled on compassion, humility, and awe. The sun sets gently on Sheba, but the golden light lingers. The Queen stands on her balcony, gazing to the north, remembering and quietly blessing the paths that brought her wisdom, not for the sake of her own greatness, but so that all who dwell in her shadow might live with hearts open and eyes lifted to the highest good. Our journey with her continues not as distant admirers, but as fellow travelers, carrying forward the light she found, and watching, with patient hope, for the day when every question leads to the fullness of understanding, and every seeking soul comes home. Pause now, breathe deeply, and rest in this truth. Every step you take toward wisdom is never in vain, and every light you carry can help guide the way for generations to come. In the next part of this journey, we will reflect further on the Queen's enduring legacy both in history and, if you let it, in the quiet story of your own unfolding life. As the mists of time drift past, we find ourselves peering not just at the steps of a returning queen or the shadows of ancient temples, but into the very heart of legacy itself. For the journey of the Queen of Sheba was never simply an event, enclosed by the walls of Jerusalem, nor a secret buried beneath the dunes of her southern homeland. Her odyssey, in all its splendor and humility, becomes a living current spark, leaping the gulf between centuries, kindling new flames in places and hearts she would never see. Such is the mysterious force of wisdom, radiating outward, eternally, multiplying in its giving dot. Picture the queen, no longer the solitary seeker, but the matriarch of a people. Her return is not triumphant in the manner of the conquerors of old, but resonant with an internal victory, a queen changed, bearing hidden treasures more precious than any visible gold. The wisdom she acquired in Jerusalem is, as scripture whispers, more precious than rubies, and all the things you may desire cannot compare with her. All that she saw, all that she heard, all that softened and illuminated her heart, now rests within her, not as a trophy but as a seed. Seeds, as every sewer knows, bear fruit only when surrendered to the earth. So then, what fruit would her journey bring, not only for her own reign but for the ages that followed? Consider how legends grow, tended first by memory, later by story, by song, by scripture, and finally by the silent longings of the soul. The story of the Queen of Sheba becomes, across generations, a mirror in which whole civilizations recognize both their searching and their hope. Here, the story itself blossoms outward. In the sacred texts, the Queen of Sheba is not forgotten but held up as a model for all who would seek authentic understanding. Generations after her caravan faded into the southern horizon, her name is invoked by sages and prophets alike. Jesus himself, as told in the Gospels, points to the Queen of the South, who went to such lengths to hear the wisdom of Solomon, holding her up as a rebuke to those who dwell in the presence of truth, yet remain unmoved. Such words echo down the halls of time. They are not merely honor, but a challenge, a summons for every listener to become a seeker, to cross their own deserts for what truly matters. Yet her legacy is not confined to Holy Scripture. Across cultures, the Queen's story becomes a river, splitting and rejoining, imbued with the colors and songs of every land it touches. In Ethiopia, she is Makeda, the wise mother of a nation. Her visit to Solomon, the foundational legend of a royal dynasty. Her wisdom is not only celebrated but woven into the very identity of a people. The light she found in Jerusalem is said to burn on in Ethiopian faith, art, and self-understanding. In Islamic tradition, she becomes Bilqis, the queen whose story is told in the Holy Quran as a parable of openness, reason, and the surrender of ego before the signs of divine truth. Each telling is different, but the heart of them all is the same. At the center lies not power, not conquest, but a fearless journey to acknowledge and embrace the highest wisdom. We might ask, why does her legend endure? Why does the story of a journey seeking wisdom, not one of battle or empire, hold generations in its silent grasp? Perhaps it is because, at our deepest level, we recognize ourselves in her question. We know the burden of wandering nights, the ache for understanding, the trembling awe of a moment when the world opens and we see, if only for a flash, what is true and good and worthy. The Queen of Sheba becomes for us the embodiment of our best selves, those able to lay aside pride, able to risk the loss of old certainties, able to rejoice when wisdom greets us in unexpected places. For wisdom, as the biblical books remind us, is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting get understanding. But this is no easy task. Like the Queen, we have to travel sometimes across seas, always across the interior deserts of habit, tradition, and fear. Wisdom is never a prize, offered to the lazy or the proud, but is revealed in the humility of search, the patience of real listening, the courage to change. And what of her impact on Solomon and his realm? In the telling of her journey, we find not only a lesson for the seeker, but for the keeper of wisdom as well. For Solomon, the Queen's visit is a test and affirmation, a prompting to remember that wisdom is not a personal possession, but a flow, a movement from God through one soul to another. In her questions, Solomon is reminded that every gift is measured by how willingly it is shared, that the true king is not the one who hoards, but the one who becomes a steward of the bounty, bestowed for the good of others. Their encounter is a glimpse of what the world might be, a place where rivalries fall aside in the face of honest inquiry, where boundaries are crossed for dialogue, and where every gift, whether of gold or guidance, of spices or its place in the great dance of giving and receiving. As the years passed and generations shifted, the meeting of the Queen and Solomon was retold, each teller drawing out new meanings. For some, it was a template for diplomacy, the possibility of meeting the other with reverence, learning, and respect. For others, the tale embodied a mystery, the creative spark that can arise only when different peoples and traditions come together, each bringing their richest gifts for mutual benefit and surprising discovery. For the mystics, her journey was a metaphor for the soul's quest for unity with the divine. The long pilgrimage from surface knowing to the bright, aching center of being where all things shine. We are left asking, what then is the enduring lesson her story offers to our age of uncertainty? The story of the Queen of Sheba calls to the parts of our hearts too often left unexplored, the places that whisper, there must be more than this. It reminds us that wisdom and understanding are no accident of birth or privilege, but the result of daring to question, of patient listening, and of reverent self-giving. Her story teaches us that every encounter with the true and the good invites us, demands us to live differently, to let old assumptions fall away, and to become bearers of light into our own communities, our own times. Pause here, gentle soul, and let this seep in. In a world that teems with information but thirsts for meaning, the Queen of Sheba is an invitation. Be curious, bravely, humbly, seek out company that will challenge you, not flatter you. When wisdom is found, let it change you, and then let it ripple out from your life, as quietly and inexorably as her own story did, from Jerusalem to Sheba and far beyond. If you find this story stirring something in you, if you, too, sense the call to be both a seeker and a sharer of wisdom, let us know in the comments. And remember, like and subscribe to Bible Stories, returning whenever your heart hungers for the quiet flame of truth. And what songs might have arisen in Sheba, long after the Queen's passing? Perhaps elders would gather children near and recite, once, our Queen crossed the wilderness not for glory, but to find a wisdom the world could not contain. In times of challenge, her example would be called forth. Seek understanding, lead with humility, welcome the stranger, cherish the light. For these four treasures, curiosity, humility, hospitality, and gratitude, become the pillars of a kingdom that endures in justice and peace. This is the subtle, wondrous power of a story lived in wisdom. It does not end. It glides on the breath of each teller, planting new seeds wherever the hungry and the hopeful gather. The Queen of Sheba's legacy is not mere myth. It is the promise that whenever one soul dares to seek, to listen, and to be changed, the world itself is made new. And so, as the sun sets on this part of the tale, let each of us meditate on what we carry home from our own searching. Have you found a wisdom that you could not keep for yourself, but felt compelled to share? Has some encounter changed forever the way you see, lead, or love? In these simple exchanges in quiet words, in acts of justice, in the blessing of open hands, the journey of Sheba continues in you. Let us look toward the final unfolding, one more step on the spiral of wisdom, where all questions rest and the deepest lights reveal their fullness. Because stories, like the soul's pilgrimage, do not end with answers, but with the next willing step into greater understanding, deeper humility, and ever brighter hope. As we arrive at the final segment of this timeless journey, let us reflect deeply on the enduring legacy and spiritual resonance of the Queen of Sheba's extraordinary pilgrimage. Her story is far more than an ancient tale. It is a beacon shining across the corridors of history, inviting each of us into the enduring dance of curiosity, humility, and transformation that defines the human quest for wisdom. Consider the profound wisdom of the Scriptures, which tell us, the heart of the discerning acquires knowledge, for the ears of the wise seek it out. The Queen of Sheba embodied this divine principle in her fearless pursuit of truth. She ventured beyond the comfortable borders of her own world, carrying not only gifts of gold and spices, but also the sacred cargo of questions that pressed upon her soul. Her courage to seek what was unfamiliar, to challenge what was accepted, holds a lesson as vital now as it was then, that true understanding demands movement across deserts, across doubts, and across the walls we build within ourselves. Upon her return to Sheba, the Queen was no longer merely a sovereign but a vessel, transformed by the encounter with Solomon and the God he served. This transformation marked by humility and echoes the psalmist's declaration, The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All who follow his precepts have good understanding. Here, fear is neither terror nor dread, but the trembling reverence before the infinite, the acknowledgement of our place in the grand design of the Creator. The legacy she carried home was not just policies or wealth, but a new vision of leadership, one where justice flows like a river, kindness extends like shade, and wisdom is shared rather than hoarded. The Queen's story challenges us. How do we, in our own realms, be they families, communities, or nations, live out a leadership that mirrors divine justice and mercy? How do we open ourselves to the transformative power of humility, letting the brightness of truth humble yet uplift our souls? Her journey also speaks powerfully to the spiritual seeker within each of us. Like the psalmist, we are called to lift up our eyes to the hills, from whence comes our help. Our help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. The Queen's story reminds us that the search for understanding is never fulfilled in isolation. It requires engagement, dialogue, and reverence for the mystery beyond human knowing. In moments of quiet reflection, we might imagine her stillness under the stars, the cool desert air carrying the whispers of prayers learned in a foreign land, prayers rising to the one God, eternal and all-knowing. She stood as a bridge not only between two kingdoms, but between human curiosity and divine revelation, between earthly wisdom and heavenly truth. This sacred interplay speaks to the paradox of wisdom. It is a treasure diligently sought, and yet a gift freely given. The Queen's transformation points us toward the truth that the greatest discoveries are not trophies to display, but lights to carry. Each question bravely asked, each humility exercised, and each step taken beyond fear is a candle passed along the unending chain of seekers. Before we close this chapter, let us again invite you to engage. If this story has stirred your heart, if you feel the pulse of inquiry beating within you, please like and subscribe to the Bible Stories channel. Share your reflections and write 777 in the comments if your spirit longs for the mysteries of heaven, the unfolding of wisdom, or the courageous steps that lead beyond certainty into grace. Your voice is part of this living story, an eternal melody woven through generations of seekers like the Queen of Sheba herself. That as the sun sets gently over the sands of Sheba and the stars emerge one by one, remember this: every journey to wisdom is sacred, and every gracious heart willing to be transformed bears a light that can illuminate even the darkest paths. May the spirit of the Queen's quest inspire us all to listen deeply, to seek courageously, and to open our hearts to the divine mysteries that beckon beyond our knowing. For in such seeking, we find not only answers, but ourselves, our true selves, fashioned in the image of the wise Creator. Thank you for joining this profound journey. Until we meet again in another story, walk gently in the light of wisdom, and always keep your heart open to the wonder that surrounds us. Are you ready to carry forward the legacy? The path of the seeker, the pilgrim, and the humble sovereign awaits. Let us go forth together,